Okay, so talk a little bit about culture, and I'll tell a couple stories. Um, the When I was working at Mount Aloysius, I titled this presentation "Finding Your Way." Okay, and one day when I was working at Mount Aloysius, you've heard of a fork in the road. I actually saw a fork on the road. This fork in the road, or on the road, on the sidewalk, and I picked up the fork and I took it, took it to the garbage, and I just kept reflecting about this fork on the road, and how when we talk about positive culture, how important it is to be intentional about our actions. So when people are passing this fork, are what are they doing? Are they thinking, or do they just ignore it because that's part of the scenery? Do we think I don't know who dropped that, so I'm not picking it up? So all the things we could be thinking, and I see this as an opportunity. I saw this fork on the road as an opportunity to think about how we approach building positive cultures. And this directly ties into what the topic for the session was, which was, treating people well. And people leave mainly, and the Gallup polls say people leave mainly because they're not treated well. It's not always about money. People want to be heard. They want to be empowered, and maybe they don't get along with their frontline supervisor or their coworkers. So when I see this fork on the road, I think about the action of squatting down, picking it up, and taking care of it. Right. So when you see that fork, you actually have a choice, just like you do in a fork in the road. You can go right or left. So when we see this fork on the road, we have a choice. We can be intentional about picking it up or not. So the fork represents for me many things. It could be a coworker that's struggling. It could be someone who really needs someone to talk to. And do we stop and acknowledge that, or we just walk on by that fork? So a lot of times when I talk about culture, there's kind of I call it an old model or a traditional model. It's one of those traditions that isn't a good one, where we kind of just go with the flow, right? And we're not really intentional about how we treat each other. Or we can go with a new model that takes a lot more work, to be honest, of a let's try more of a caring model. Sometimes caring for people and making sure they're healthy and safe is a difficult thing for us to do. It's outside of our comfort zone. Not all of us can acknowledge and actually see the fork and pick it up, using that analogy again. So what we talk about is stretching ourselves, is going to a stretch zone. And sometimes there's a leap to get to that stretch zone. There's a leap to do something that you're not completely comfortable with. So we have to force ourselves sometimes to take that leap. So if you see someone who's struggling, do you stop and acknowledge it, or do you just think, well, maybe someone else will do it, or yeah, I got something else going on, right? I'll just give a quick example of this. The other day, I was at the Giant Eagle over by our offices, and there was a young lady who obviously she wrecked her car. She ran into something. I don't know what she ran into. You could tell she was very stressed. She was on the phone and kind of shaking and kept looking at the car and was very upset. And a lot of people may just go, walk on by or drive on by. I couldn't do it. I stopped. I said, "Is everything okay?" And she said, "Yeah, this is my first accident." I said, "Well, unfortunately, I've been in several accidents." I said, "Well, that's okay. At least you're safe. Cars can be fixed. Cars can be replaced as long as you're okay. Do you need me to do anything for you?" She said no, and we moved away. And some people don't know how to receive that either. She could have thought I'm just some creep driving up to uh, invade her business, right? But it's important that we reach out when we see someone that's struggling. It's just like that intentional action of picking up that fork. You have to understand your role and the choice in that, and you have to have some basic tools that I'll try to cover here before the end of this session. So positive culture and this interaction that we're talking about, whether it's supervisor to worker or the people on the front lines to the people you support, this cannot be a sideshow. This can't be a once in a while or once a year type of training. Positive culture, these interactions have to happen every day, and especially during the coronavirus, especially when people are struggling. Just imagine, and I know you guys do this, how often you wear this mask, right? And how long. And just wearing this mask alone has an impact on your ability to do your work. And unfortunately, I work in a job where I don't have to wear it all day, but there are times where I have to wear it for long stretches of time, like when we're interacting for this conference, and it gets to you. It gets to you a little bit. So just that alone impacts how you interact with others. So in this world of positive culture, can't be a sideshow. It can't be a once a year that leap to a comfort zone. And the more you do it, just like anything else, the more you do it, the more you practice, the easier it gets. So we have to really start with what is your motivation to be a good person. And I think that um, I think that for me, it's my family. I want to really do things that make them proud, and I want to set a good example. I have 3 kids. People who know me, I talk about my kids all the time, and I really want to set a good example for who they're going to be as human beings. Um, and I want to set a good example for my coworkers around me and everybody that I interact with. My goal in life is to every interaction I have with another human being, they walk away from that action feeling appreciated and loved at a certain level. So as we get into this, it's really important that you have a great understanding of yourself. You have to know at this point in our history, are you thriving or surviving as a person? And if you feel like you're thriving, keep it going, right? Do the things that you've been doing to get to that point. But if you feel like you're surviving, it's kind of like we have to take an inventory of the things that are impacting us in a negative way. And we have to come up with a plan on how we're going to address those things that are impacting us in a negative way. And it's okay. And I've said this a lot on our Friday calls. I've said this in our interactions that, you know, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to say that I'm struggling. People want to help generally, and sometimes they don't know if you're struggling unless you say something. Because a lot of us put on a good front, right? And so, don't be afraid to be vulnerable. We're all vulnerable especially during this time. And sometimes, especially if you're in a leadership role, sometimes it gets kind of lonely, and we should start our own support group or something maybe. And also, what are the things that you can control in these interactions that we talk about? And remember, positive culture is about interactions with other human beings. And what I like to say all the time is you have some gifts. So I'd like you to think about right now, and even put in the chat box if you would like, what are the gifts that you give to the people around you? I like to think that I bring passion to relationships. I like to think that um, I bring creativity to our interactions. I like to think that I help with problem solving. So my passion for the work, um, my creativity, these are gifts that I share. So these are things I can control. These are things that I can deliver. We can't always control what other people do, right? Actually, we can never do that. We can only influence, but we can really influence others when we share our gifts. So think about those gifts and think about how you can share those gifts with others. One of the things that gets in the way, or a lot of things get in the way of the idea of a positive culture, I call the pitfalls, are the things that we do every day, and sometimes it's so automatic we don't even realize it. So one of the pitfalls that one of the pits we fall into is complaining about things. I think many of us complain about things way too much, and we complain more than we come up with a plan on how to address certain things. So the impact, and we kind of, when we complain to each other about certain things, it really puts us in a negative energy. I believe a lot about energy. When someone's not feeling well or someone's not doing well that day when they walk into the room, because you can feel that energy, and they are struggling. So, when we come to work and before complaining, we're chipper, we're feeling good about the work. I love the people around me, I love my work, but the more we complain, it really gets to us, and it changes our attitude, and it changes our ability to effectively interact with each other. And think about, if you think about a negative work experience that you had, or if you're maybe having one now, what is the impact of those interactions on you? And so you can put on in the chat box, when you're around people that are negative and complaining, what does that do to you mentally and physically? It makes you tired. It actually increases your heart rate to an uncomfortable level. The stress that it brings to your body, we all know how detrimental stress can be to people. To you mentally, you go into a zone where you don't appreciate the things around you. You kind of get tunnel vision. You're not able to sit back and really enjoy everything that's going on around you. So what are those negative physical and mental impacts and emotional impacts on you? So you think about those negative work experiences. What did it do to you as a person? So we've asked, my years of training, we've asked a lot of questions. What is the impact of that, what I said earlier, that traditional kind of negative culture? And the impact is low self-esteem. You feel isolated. There's actually physical pain. There's a lack of motivation. You rebel sometimes against the things around you. There's no change for the better. Your creativity shuts down. It actually creates more problems. There's power trips. The negativity spreads. As you all know, negativity spreads just like being positive can spread. There's troubled relationships, and it just reduces the growth, the positive growth for your organization. So I'd like to talk about some simple tools that you can use to address these issues, to impact the people around you. There's 3 ways to change your culture. The first is through training, and training's probably training's good. Don't get me wrong, but it's probably the least effective way to move a culture, because you go to a training, you get all this great information. I'm saying this during a conference, so I probably shouldn't say this, but you get good information, you take from it what you want, and I hope you're getting a lot from this, but it kind of fades over time. So that's one way, is through training. The second way is through conversation. So like I said earlier, a positive relationships, positive culture has to happen through daily conversation, daily interactions. It's that practice I talk about. And the third is by leading by example. If you do these 3 things in concert, training, conversation, leading by example, you will start to see movement. I learned these things from my grandmother and my parents, and so my grandmother taught my I wish you could see my slide, because I have a great picture of my grandma right now. But there's we learn these things about respect, the golden rule, all the things, and sometimes we fall into the trap of saying, well, that's just common sense. And the only time we bring up that should be common sense is when people don't practice common sense, and we bring it up a lot. So what building a culture and building these relationships I'm talking about isn't really about common sense. If it was common sense, we would all do it all the time. It's about holding yourself to a high standard and practicing some basic concepts. Like my grandma I talk about taught me about respect. She taught me about a lot of things. She also, one time I was riding my bike to my grandma's, and I had $5 in my back pocket. And as I was riding my bike across town in Tiffin, Ohio, to my grandma's, somehow, some way, the $5 fell out of my back pocket. And I got to my grandma's. I ran up to her apartment. I reached for my back pocket and no $5. And I was so disappointed. And she's taught me this lesson. She said, never put money in your back pocket. So to this day, I put my wallet in my front pocket. She also taught me that anybody that overbids on the Price is Right is a stupid son of a bitch. So I apologize for the cussing, but she also taught me how to cuss a little bit. But let's go back to those simple things that you can do to be a better person, a better professional. So you live by principles, and this is something I've practiced. I always like to practice what I preach, and I've been preaching these things called the must-haves for a lot of years. And these are principles that I developed, principles of respect, I call them, that I developed probably 20 years ago as I observe the interactions that go on between human beings, whether it's the people you support or the interactions between you and your team or the interactions between you and your friends and family. So I think we have to carve our own path. So I would like you to think about right now, what are the characteristics of a great professional? And you can put in the chat box again, share if you'd like. So if you had to come up with 3 characteristics of a great professional, what would those characteristics be? When I was at Mount Aloysius before I came to Opera, I asked this question of the staff that we worked with. We did some polling and some surveying, and the top three characteristics that we came up with were: we are caring, we are dependable, and we are patient. So once you establish those 3 characteristics, and you can do your own personal characteristics, what is the plan? How good are you at being caring, dependable, and patient, or whatever your 3 are? And if you're struggling with one of those, how can you do better? So what we talked about for years is assessing yourself from head to toe. What are the thoughts about the people around you? How do you use your eyes? How do you use your ears? The words are so important. Do you use supportive words or do you use threatening words? We can have a whole another hour session about, when we discipline employees, what are they walking away with? I've been disciplined, believe it or not, early in my career a couple times, and I never skipped away from one of those sessions feeling good about that interaction. So what words do we use? What kind of heart do you have for the work? If you had one word to describe your heart for the work, what is it? Mine's passionate. I have a passionate heart, as I mentioned earlier. How do we use our touch? How do we use our time? And how do we use our feet? So you might be thinking, what's feet have to do with anything? If I'm really caring about you and what you're saying, my feet are pointing towards you. If I'm really caring about you and we're having some issues going on, I get out of my seat and I walk to where you are and I have that interaction. There's a great standard that a CEO of a major company in the US has, and it says, I only use email to share a document or to set a meeting. Every other interaction is either done in person on the phone, now with Zoom, or actually face-to-face. I thought that was a great standard to live by, especially for a frontline supervisor. Every interaction happens, so you can hear the voice, you can see the expression. All these things are crucial to picking up great information. So a couple of the must-haves is the power of time. If you just spend a few seconds with people, amazing things can happen. I can ask you how you're doing, and it's important to stick around to hear the answer. I can ask you how you're doing and wait for 10 seconds And you can find out so much. Like I said, you could read the face. You can tell if someone says, I'm doing well or I'm doing good, but their face doesn't show it. You can say, are you really? Is there something I can do to help? It's also important. We've talked a lot about this through the coronavirus. It's important to take time for yourself. Don't don't neglect yourself, right? Take time away, unplug. I was just talking to a CEO the other day, and he said, "Pete, do you think I should take a vacation?" I said, "Absolutely, you must," because he doesn't want to miss out on anything. But what I tried to help him realize, if you don't take time away, then come back fresh, it's not going to be good for your organization. And the other thing about time is be patient. Relationships take time. And if you lose trust, healing takes time. Be patient. Be patient. Give that time. It's a gift. Time is a gift. The other thing is just being more positive. Smiles are contagious. If you smile at someone, more than likely, unless they're really in a bad way, they will smile back. Kind words can change the vibe of interactions. If we were in a big group all together, I wish we were, I would have a little exercise where you just offer kind words to the people around you. I like your hair. I like, you look great today. You're very creative. Whatever those things are, man, those can really turn the tide. Those positive words can mean everything. Being positive is hard, but there's a big payoff. Sometimes we don't feel like being positive, right? We have bad days. All of us do. But it's those times, especially if you're a frontline supervisor and you walk in or you lead a team, you have to turn it on. We can't leave our problems at the door. I know that. But we have to be able to find a way to turn on that positivity. And this is hard, right? And I say we all need a scream room. It's hard to be positive every day. You need a spot where you can go and just scream, let it out. And it's also good to have a scream buddy. Now, your scream buddy isn't going to join with you in the screaming. Like I said, complaining back and forth isn't good for people. So you go to your scream room with your scream buddy, and your scream buddy will eventually say, okay, that's enough. What are we going to do about it? Your scream buddy will help you find solutions, but it's okay to let the scream out. When people are in crisis, they need a connection. They need to know that you're there for them. When we did our Good Life training, we call this emotional first aid. Just like if someone cuts their finger, you do first aid. If you see someone that's going through a rough time, you give emotional first aid. So, in our couple minutes left, here's the bottom line. When that fork's on the road, you have to take initiative and you have to be intentional. Good choices equals good days. You have to give 100% as much as you can, and that's a old maybe football coach cliche. And yes, I used to coach football, not gymnastics. And you have to give 100%. If you give 100% to people, they will reciprocate. And practice, 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 practice. So I have a challenge for you. I was listening to an interview with an Ohio State football coach, and he was talking about one of his quarterbacks, or the starting quarterback, and he says he's just not quite good enough. And his answer to that, when the reporter said, "What do you mean he's not good enough?" His answer was he needs 7,000 repetitions, 7,000 repetitions, 7,000 throws, 7,000 snaps, 7,000 handoffs, and he'll get better. So I have a challenge for you. If you do 5 kind and intentional interactions a day, 5 a day. It shouldn't take you more than a few minutes, or even, like I said, 10 seconds or less to check in with someone to see how they're doing. Just do 5 days a week. Be a jerk on the weekends, unless you work the weekends. Be a jerk on the weekends if you want. It'll take you 5.4 years to do 7,000 reps. Then do 10, cut that in half. Do 20 kind interactions a day, and you'll get through that faster. So here's part of this challenge. Give 100% for 1% of your day. 1% of your day is 14 minutes. Commit to doing, and this is for yourself too, right? commit to 14 minutes of your day to writing a note of appreciation to someone, to calling someone you haven't talked to in a while, to checking in with your team to make sure they're okay. 14 minutes a day, 1% of your day. I know you can do it. So that is the the quick um, uh, presentation that I had in my back pocket if something went wrong. Um, if you have any questions or um, comments, please in the chat box, let me know. And I hope all of you are well. I think we're getting ready for lunch. Is that right, Sonia? I think we have a 45-minute lunch till our next session start at 1:30. Everybody good? Thumbs up?